For 14 years, we've been a community that has talked about separation being our deepest wound, that it is a perilous separation when we don't know where our food comes from before it ends up on our meal, and we don't know the quality of the lives of the people who raised that food and got it to us, and we don't know where the waste goes at the end of the meal, and we don't know what harm or good our money is doing if it's in a mutual fund spinning around the world somewhere, and that absolute separateness, apartness, is behind a lot of the most all the problems that we are facing in our world right now, and that we are about reconnecting with each other, reconnecting eaters and farmers and investors and entrepreneurs directly, and businesses with the communities, with the ecosystems that they serve. In fact, glance at the person to your right just for a minute. Glance over at them. You see them. You see who they are. Yeah. So now imagine, how could you delight them? Just think about it in your own mind, in your own heart. What could you do to delight the person to your right? Maybe you have a little joke you could tell them, or maybe there's a caramel in your bag, or maybe your lotion smells really good. And now imagine the person to your left has been thinking that about you. They're right now in their mind is how they could delight you. There's something in their mind right now about what they could do to make you happy. Do you feel that little warmth inside of you? That is what we are to nurture. That little warmth is what we are to nurture. If I'm to say two things, if I want to say two things, they are: one, the most important thing that we can do right now is to cultivate our capacity to care for each other. As business leaders, our most important thing that we can do right now is cultivate our capacity to care for all life. And that number two, it's time to put on our courage capes. It's time to have some confidence, because we know, really, that the only things that are working in our economy are where we have reconnected and where we are showing care for each other. I just saw Matt right down there he started, one of the co-founders of Etsy. He's speaking here this week, and I was talking to him last week in preparation for this event, and if any of you are having trouble seeing, feel free to move wherever feels appropriate too. I just noticed that I can't see you. But Matt and I were talking about what is appropriate clothing to wear to a place that might be over 100 degrees, and that we didn't know if we had any outfits like that. And Matt said, I might just get a bolt of linen and wrap myself in linen. And he was asking if maybe I would like some linen to wrap in, and maybe he could bring some for everybody, and we could all be wrapped in linen. And I said, oh, God, Matt, seriously, no way. We can't be wandering through the streets of Phoenix talking about compassion and love, like prophets of the new era wrapped in linen. Kimber would kill us. So that made me also think, though, that I should start with some hard data, some facts, not just love. So I've got some hard data here. Here is the thing. Pretty much everything that I was told growing up, I'm middle-aged, so I'm probably somewhere in there with a bunch of you, right in the middle. What we were told about how the economy was supposed to work is not. It is not. And what we were told would not work is. So here's a couple of examples. And there is data for all of this, hard data. They're the facts as much as we can believe anything is a fact. As it turns out, we can feed the world on small farms. That's right. That solar can be more cost efficient than coal. That raising minimum wage does not kill jobs. This one was new to me. It's fascinating. It's from SBA data. So I've known for a while that most all the job growth in this country over the last 25 years has come from small businesses, but that's typically defined as under 500 employees. But apparently, net job growth in the last 25 years has come from micro businesses under 20 employees, almost all of it. Fascinating, right? That employee-owned businesses are more profitable. That minority businesses are more profitable, minority-owned businesses are more profitable. that there was a big study done across 71 countries that looked at the number one cause of wage inequality over the last few decades. And it looked at, offshoring of production or suppression of minimum wages or technology innovations that have displaced workers and on and on and on. And what they found, the number one contributor to inequality in an economy has been how much what they called financialization of that economy there is. They also called that how much Wall Street activity there is in that economy. That's the number one contributor to wage inequality for the past several decades, has been how much Wall Street activity is in that economy. And that, in fact, from the Economic Development Quarterly to the Harvard Business Review, the literature is very clear at this point that if you want to funnel wealth into the fewest hands possible, you should go very large transnational corporations. If your goal is the most jobs and the most wealth for the most people, there's a direct correlation to the density and diversity of local ownership per place. Those are just the facts. Oh, and this is the final fact I'll share because it's my favorite. Back to being prophets of the new era and wandering around in linen and telling each other we love each other. As it turns out, that our fundamental human nature is actually collaborative, not competitive. That is our fundamental human nature. There's been a bunch of people who've been studying happiness and wellness for the past couple of decades because they said, well, we studied depression for so long. Let's look at what makes us well. And there's adorable little videos you can find online of who we are as people, as little tiny little monkeys. When we can barely walk, they'll do experiments trying to, the person doing the experiment will drop something or look like they're struggling in some way. And our natural instinct is want to help. Like we'll pull ourselves up and try to pick up the thing and bring it over. How can I help you? I'm with you. And that we are, and that's not true for all species. Chimpanzees are our closest relative apparently, and they don't do that. This is who we are, and we've cultivated the ability to ignore suffering, and we do that at our own great peril. So, yet, all these things I just said, all these facts, these are not the dominant messages we hear. It's not how we direct our investments. It's not what we do and what we support with policy. It's not what we teach in business school. It's not even what we tell our children about what's possible. So we gather, with things to do, work ahead. So 4 years ago, it became quite clear to us at BALLE that over the last 14 years, though many in this room have been amongst the leading experimenters in the nation, that our role needed to shift. So if there's three, to be broad, if there'd be three buckets of people, one would be kind of a bucket of people that would say, I am just going to keep doing the same things and fingers crossed, hope for different results. And then there are other people who yell at them, you should do something different. And then there are other people, pretty much people like this in this room, who just have gone over here to try to figure out something else. We don't know what we're doing. We're just going to try to figure out something else. And the kinds of values we shared as we innovated were around that place matters, that we can see the connections between things in place, that ownership matters, that we should, whoever creates something of value should benefit from that. That we're not going to be okay unless we're all okay, so nature matters, opportunity matters, that we should actually measure what matters, not, microwaves per household, but are we more well, and that relationships matter most. And this year, I just didn't know how to actually say this slide without also saying Black Lives Matter. Yeah, it's in solidarity that Black Lives Matter. And what did you just show me on time? 10. Okay, great. So, when we looked at where we were 4 years ago as an organization, ourselves as BALLE, working in this movement of innovators, and if you'll get to know people in this room the next few days. I know a lot of you know a lot of people here already, but this is really a room of deep innovators. You'll talk to everybody, and it's a bunch of entrepreneurial sorts. So if you're new, just say I'm new, and they will like you. But you'll stand next to somebody who's just starting a state bank, and somebody else who is running a food hub for a whole region, and somebody else is, it's a very innovative room. Many of the people here coordinate networks of hundreds or thousands of businesses and of investors in particular regions, and we saw 4 years ago that there was indeed a movement underway. We did research to find out, could we help to accelerate that? What would BALLE's role be if we shifted from just awareness, building awareness, to could we accelerate the emergence of this new economy that was trying to be born, that's based on connection? And indeed, you can accelerate such a movement if something is starting to happen. And the way forward is to find the trailblazers, the front runners, the innovators, who are trying to figure out a new way to do it, but feel completely alone, because you're always fighting against an old system while trying to create what's next. So they feel totally alone. If you can find them, bring them together so they feel the courage of their peers, so that they can have counsel from each other, so that they can put a frame around their ideas and people can see them. It's not just one isolated thing over here, one isolated thing over there. People can see them when they come together. You can nourish them with whatever it would be to support their work. Data, money, love. And then you could illuminate their work. You could show it to other people so that others could imagine a path to follow. And then by that, you could accelerate the emergence of whatever was trying to be born. And so we started to do that with a few different initiatives. One is that we now host the nation's only fellowship that is focused on cultivating the emergence of a new economy. Most of these people are in the room, and these are truly extraordinary human beings. Over the last 4 years, we've had 3 cohorts, 42 fellows actually, though it says 41. And each of them represent hundreds or thousands of businesses in particular geographic regions, and they are people who are working along the continuum, the continuum of pre-entrepreneur support. So in some communities, you absolutely need to be working with people to help them graduate high school, because as my friend D'Artagnan, who is a fellow, says, equity and equality are not the same thing. We need to go to the places where, because of various isms like racism, we have not had the same opportunities to build wealth, and we absolutely need to put support to ensure that we get to a place of equity. And then we need to work with those who are supporting the micro-entrepreneurs, those who are hosting business networks that are about not just high-tech startups, for God's sake. How many people are going to have a high-tech startup? Very, very few, as it turns out, and the data backs that up too. We don't just need another, Silicon Valley of Kansas. We actually need the businesses that are creating most of the jobs, most people that have an idea of how do they want to make the goods and services for their community. And these business networks are supporting them with how could you consider ownership differently? How do you think about environmental impact? How do you collaborate to bring down the price of renewable energy in your place, or collaborate to make local food distribution viable? And we're also working with the fellows, with people who work in government, who instead of what's been happening for the last couple of decades, where economic development offices typically are now just subsidizing Marriott or Boeing or Dell, everybody's racing, trying to compete with each other. Can I get you here for a bit? And in essence, we use public tax dollars to pay the salaries of people for that company that moved to your town for a couple of years till the subsidies dry up, and then they move away again. Instead, are trying to invest in and figure out how to do community entrepreneurship that's really working for their places. And we've brought these fellows together for the last 4 years. We've also hosted 2 other circles. One is a local economy investor circle, and another is a community foundation circle. These are people who are using financial capital for the same vision, the same values. The investors have and work with family foundations and investment companies, and they're looking in a place, okay? If we're looking at a food system, for instance, 50 or 60 years ago, most of the vegetables and fruits that we ate came from this region. Where has infrastructure been lost that would make that possible again? Where does philanthropy need to go to support that? And then where can I invest in that new fertile bed that we have helped to build with philanthropy to make the economy viable, equitable, and healthy again? The Community Foundation Circle we do with RSF Social Finance, and we've brought together 15 community foundations who are exploring, for the first time really, how would we I assume a lot of people here know, but typically a foundation will have their money in the stock market, and then they get their small returns every year, and they give that away. But some of them are starting to realize that that way of investing is maintaining a system of inequality. One told me with some horror, when they reviewed where they were actually investing their money, some of their biggest returns were coming from predatory payday loan companies, and yet they were trying to make little grants to those same communities that were being harmed by those investments. And so together they're figuring out how could we shift toward place-based impact investing. And like the fellows, they have a learning community, and all of them are bringing their ideas now forward for us. Because we have a big and needed vision to create within a generation a global network of interconnected local economies that work in harmony with nature to support a healthy, prosperous, and joyful life for all people. And I think we take within a generation quite seriously, given where we are. In May last year, I'm not sure the month, but there was a conference in the UK that brought together 250 people. I tell you this because the concept of inequality is in the national and global dialogue like it's never been before in my lifetime. So last year, 250 people in the UK came together in London it was a unique conference because they represented 30% of the world's financial stock, just the people in the room. 250 people represented 30% of the world's financial stock. And the title of the conference was Inclusive Capitalism. So they wanted to be more inclusive. And I actually was quite excited about that because, okay, they really want to be more inclusive. But I went to their website and downloaded the report, which McKinsey had done for them for I don't know how much money. And there were 3 big ideas. One was big businesses should buy more from small. Great, there's lots of programs that support such a thing. We should do more jobs training, maybe teach some more business ethics. That's all they came up with. And so this community, we actually know what to do. So these are the things that we are focusing on at this conference, all 8 of these strategies. Telling the story differently, cultivating ownership in our own communities, determinedly investing for opportunity, building the local economy ecosystems that allow strength and resilience of many people, rebuilding our soil, divesting from Wall Street and investing in our communities, leveling our policies at the local level, leveling the playing field for local businesses, people, and nature. And then this final one, my last comment would be about this one, using magic, soul, and inspiration to convene entrepreneurs and to catalyze the courage of their hearts. Because really nothing's going to be different unless we want different things. It's really not. And if you think about it, apparently in my daughter, by the time she has a daughter, this is such a short amount of time, let's just put it all out there. We all could die very soon, really. I mean, we all are dying soon. It's a short little life, but let's just go for it. Boldness. My daughter, by the time she has a child, apparently we're going to need 70% more food being created on this planet, and by the time she has a daughter, half the world won't have access to clean water if we continue as we are. I mean, what does that even look like? We know one path, all right, so consider alternatives. We reconnect, or we carry on with individualistic, competitive, me versus you, business versus business, nation versus nation, dominant over those who are oppressed, big versus small. The CEO of Nestle said, water isn't a human right while trying to buy up water springs. And that is one path, and that path for sure is war. Or we decide that's not who we actually are, and in fact, it is not who we actually are. That's what the science has shown from the Greater Good Science Center and other places these last 20 years, that actually who we are, what we all share in common, all human beings, whether regardless of ethnicity, geography, political affiliation, age, we all share in common 4 things, the 4 things that make us deeply well, and they are, we feel well when we feel deeply connected to our own inner voice and our purpose. We feel well when we feel deeply connected to other human beings. We feel well when we feel awe and reverence for the larger natural world that we are a part of. And we feel well when we've been generous. The being generous makes us feel good. All people feel good when we've been generous. And so those, connecting to self and each other in the natural world, that is local by its very nature. Real prosperity, true well-being is local by its very nature. And the beautiful thing is, it can be cultivated. We were taught this. Our true nature is connection with each other. And the final thing I'll say is a man named Adam, I can't remember his last name. He wrote a book called Givers and Takers from Wharton, out of Wharton he is. And it basically shows that people break down into 3 categories. You either always give or you always take in a scenario. Or most people respond to what shows up to them. If you give, I give. If you take, I take. And so that one giver can completely change the whole culture of one room. So if we think here, that thing I was thinking about you and I was going to try to delight you, I'm just going to go ahead and do it. Like at the end of the night, I was going to delight you. And we could just practice that with each other. We can cultivate that within ourselves, and that is the path forward. So that's a courage cape. Carmen Rojas, who is on our board, earlier this year, she was talking to me about, time to be bold, And I said, she said, let them eat courage cake, and I got all excited about that too. Yes, they should all eat courage cake. I'm going to eat some courage cake. And after a while, she said, Michelle, I said cape, not cake. So all I would say is I would ask you to join with me. We can cultivate our capacity to care for each other, practice opening our hearts, and feel confident. The data is with us. Put on our courage cape, because lots of other people are afraid and they don't know. But we know what to do. We know what to do. And so it's our time. Let's put on our courage capes and fly.